Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I am Cilla Travers back with another tutorial. In today's video, I will be showing you how I made the upper part of this outfit. This outfit is a jumpsuit, but I will only be showing you how I made the top part, which is basically a one shoulder top that is an asymmetric top with a keyhole neckline. Before we get right into this video, please kindly like this video and leave a comment for me, and also subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed. Okay, now if this is something you'd like to see, without further ado, let's jump right into it. To begin, place your pattern paper on fold and then go ahead and trace out your basic bodice pattern. So we'll not be drafting this pattern from scratch because that would be a long thing. Okay, so I have my basic bodice pattern that fits perfectly, so if you have one, go ahead and trace it out. Now I'm going to take you through what I have on the vital areas. On the bust line, I have 9.5 inches, which is basically my bust divided by 4 plus half of an inch ease. On the waistline, I have my back waist measurement plus 2 inches for darts. Okay, so I did not draw out my dart line because I want the dart on the bodice to align with the dart on the pant I will be attaching this top to. Now the finished dart on the back of my pant is 3 inches away from the center back, so with that in mind, I'll go ahead and draft my dart on the bodice. From center back, I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch. That will be my center back dart. Now to mark the length of the center back dart, I'm going to first of all come down 3/4 of an inch from the top. This is my neckline depth. Then I'm going to mark the midpoint between the neckline depth and the bust line. So this could be your first option for the center back dart. You can connect it to this point, or you can just connect the center back dart straight down to the back neckline depth. Now I'll go ahead and plot my dart. So what I have remaining after taking the center back dart is about 1¼ inches. So on both sides of the dart line, I'm going to mark in 5/8 of an inch. It's important to note that the longer your center back dart, the more it cuts into your bust line. So for this reason, I'm going to take the measurement of what I have left, and what I have right now on the bust line is 9 inches. Next, because this top is going to be a sleeveless top, I'm going to mark in from the shoulder point 1/2 an inch, and then using my French curve, I'll go ahead and redraw the back armhole. Now to determine the shoulder seam, I'm going to mark in from the new shoulder point 2 inches. So this is the width of my shoulder seam. Next, I'm going to open up this pattern, and then using my French curve, I'll go ahead and draw the neckline. So right now, I'm going to contour the shoulder seam by coming down along the neckline from the new neck point, 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to connect this point to the new shoulder point like so. So this is going to help to contour the neckline of the top. Make sure you copy the waist dart as well as the center back dart to the other side of the pattern. Lastly, we need to true the neckline, because once you close that center back dart, it's going to create a distortion around the neckline. So to true the center back dart, you want to take the length of the first dart leg, which is the longer one, then equalize the shorter dart leg to be the same length as the longer one, and then go in with your French curve and redraw that portion of the neckline. Or the easiest thing to do is just to close that center back dart and then smoothen the back neckline. And we're done with drafting the back. So now I've gone ahead to cut out the pattern. I've added my seam allowance all around the pattern except for the center back, which I need to add my zipper allowance. So I'm just making a note here to remind me when cutting to add in my zipper allowance. So guys, let's move on to draft the front of this top. So I'm going to quickly take you through what I have on the front bodice. Now on the bust line, I have 9 1/8 inches, which is basically my bust divided by 4 plus 1/8 of an inch is. On the waistline, I have my front waist measurement plus 1.5 inches for dart. Now, like we did for the back piece, we're going to go in on the shoulder seam 1/2 inch and then redraw that armhole. Now on the dart line, I'm going to mark 3/4 inch on both sides, and then I'll repeat the same for the underbust. So this is going to contour that underbust area. I'm going to join both points together with a straight line and then go in with my French curve to connect the point on the underbust to the bust point like so. Next, you would need to flip to the other side of the pattern because the pattern is on fold, okay? And whatever you did on the first side needs to be done here. Next, I'm going to square a line from mid-shoulder to meet the bust point. So I flip it back to the other side, and from the new shoulder point, I'm going to mark in 2 inches, just as I did on the back of the bodice. And then you need to open up the pattern. As you know, it's on fold. And then using my French curve, I'm going to draw the front neckline like so. Next, we need to contour the front neckline at the shoulder just like we did at the back. So I'm going to come down from the new neck point, 1/4 inch, and connect that point to the shoulder point. So that is the contour dart for the shoulder. Next, I'm going to come out from that line that runs from mid-shoulder to the bust point and come out 1/2 inch. So this is going to contour that front neckline. So you can either use from 1/2 inch to 1 inch at most, especially for people that are very busty. You would have to use like 1 inch because they tend to have a smaller upper chest. So you have to take in more on the neckline for them. Now this dart we just took out will be transferred into the waist. Now to draw the keyhole, I'm going to go upward from my bust level line 1 inch. So this is going to serve as a guide. And then I am going to draw a line from the midpoint of my new shoulder seam. And then I'm going to connect it to this 1 inch mark above the bust level. Next, I'm going to go in with freehand and just sort of create the shape of the keyhole shape that I want. So I will be going back and forth with my French curve until I get the perfect keyhole that I desire. So I would say the widest part of the keyhole, that's the part that is close to the bust level line, just right at the center front. So I guess if you measure the widest width of the keyhole, it would be about 2 inches at most, because I would not be adding any seam allowance around that keyhole. So when you sew around that keyhole, it's going to be a little bit wider than what you have on the pattern. Moving on, we need to contour that keyhole. If not, you're going to have some gaping around that area. So you need to draw a line from the midpoint of the neckline to meet the bust point. And then you want to come out toward the center front and mark 1/4 inch. So you can mark 1/4 inch to, let's say, 1/2 inch. It all depends. Or you can, to be safe, you can mark 1/4 inch to 1 centimeter at the bottom part. But at the top part, you need to mark in 1/4 inch and connect it just to the point at the neckline. So you contour the top part of the keyhole with 1/4 inch, then you contour the bottom with at least 1/4 inch to 1 centimeter, which is 3/8 inch. I'll go ahead and cut out the pattern. So I'm cutting it out without adding any seam allowance because we need to transfer all this dart into the waist dart. So at this point, please pay close attention on how I'm going about cutting out this pattern. Everything else from this point is self-explanatory. So kindly pay close attention to what I'm doing.
What up, Toby?
So I'm going to be separating the band from the top part of this pattern, and I'm going to glue the band together to make it into one piece. Alright guys, I'm done cutting out the pattern. At this point, I've not added any seam allowance, so I'm going to add in my seam allowance directly on my fabric. So right now, I'll go ahead and transfer this to my fabric. I've gone ahead to transfer my pattern to my fabric, and I made sure I added my seam allowance before cutting. Now the only part I did not add seam allowance is around the keyhole, and this is because I'm using just a tiny bit of seam allowance, like 1/8 of an inch, to sew around the keyhole. Now for the top part, I added interfacing to both the main piece and the lining piece, and I'm using the same fabric as my lining for the front. For the band, I added interfacing to just the main piece. For the back piece, I have cut out matching lining. I interfaced only the main piece, and I also transferred my darts to both the main and the lining piece. Please make sure you add your zipper allowance to the center back on both the main piece and the lining piece if you did not add zipper allowance to your pattern. Okay, by the way, one very important thing you need to be cautious about is after deciding what position you want the one shoulder to be, either the left or the right, you need to be very cautious when you're cutting, because I made a mistake when cutting. After cutting the back, which is to be at the right hand side, I went to cut the front for the left hand side, but thank goodness I had more fabric to fix this issue. Okay, so please remember that. Now I'll go ahead and sew the bust dart with the seam allowance which I added to that area. So I'm sewing with 1/4 of an inch. Next, I'm going to sew the back waist dart and then repeat the same process for the lining piece. Next, with right side facing right side, I'm going to sew the main piece and the lining piece together at the armhole, the keyhole, and the neckline. So I'll be leaving the side seam open because I'll be slipping in a bra cup right into it. Okay, now after sewing, you need to trim down your seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch. That is if you added 1/2 of an inch to the armhole and to the neckline. So trim it down to 1/4 of an inch, and then you want to snip around the neckline and the armhole, and then turn it to the right side and give it a good press. Next, I'm going to be joining the band to the top part. First of all, you need to put a notch right in the middle of the band. Now you want to take the main band piece and flip the right side onto the top part of the top. So you just want to do it in such a way that the top part is right in the middle between the two bands. So you want to make sure you pin it properly in place, and then take this to the sewing machine and sew. For the back piece, take your lining, right side facing right side, and join both pieces together at the armhole and the neckline. Trim down the seam allowance around the armhole and the neckline and snip along the seam. Turn it to the right side, give it a good press, and yeah. So the next step would be to join the front and back together at the shoulder seam. Kindly pay close attention to what I'm doing right now. So the thing here is that when you're slipping in the shoulder seam into the back, you want to make sure the shoulder seam close to the armhole clicks at the armhole seam of the back, and the shoulder seam close to the neckline clicks very close to the seam around the back neckline. Okay, So once this is done, I'll take this to my sewing machine and sew. Now there are two ways to join the front and the back together at the side seam. The first method is very straightforward, and I like the first method because if you need to do any adjustments, it's pretty much easy. Okay, so you just need to take the front and the back together and join it together at the side seam. Now for the second method, all you need to do is to join the front and the back together at the side seam and then flip the lining piece of the back piece over to the front, making sure both the front and the back piece meets at the neckline seam. Okay, and then you want to pin it in place and sew, and then turn it to the right side. I figured out a way to test the top, and I realized that I have gaping, especially on the side of the back piece. My shoulder blade was pushing against the neckline, and that created a gape on the back neckline. I actually knew from the beginning that this was going to happen. I already have a solution in mind on how to fix it if this happens. So what you want to do is that you want to go in from center back 1/4 of an inch on the neckline. And then you want to connect this 1/4 inch mark to 0 point on the waistline, like so. So if you've not yet cut yours on fabric, you need to make this adjustment on your pattern. So this means you need to trim off the section before adding in your zip allowance. So now I'll go ahead and make this correction on my fabric. Now to make this adjustment, I'm going to mark in 1 inch from center back on the neckline, and then I'm going to maintain the 3/4 of an inch zipper allowance I added initially on the waistline. I'm going to connect both points together with a straight line, and once this is done, I'll go ahead and fold in that zipper allowance along this straight line and give it a good press. Please and please, you need to repeat the same process for the other side of the back piece. Okay, you are making this adjustment on both sides of the back piece, not just on one side. So before fixing your zip, make sure that you have a smooth transition along the back neckline. So this is what I'm checking for, just checking they both align properly and on the neckline and on the waistline after folding in that zipper allowance. So right now I've gone ahead to pin my side seam, so I'm going for the second method because I want my seam allowance to be hidden, and I don't really want to trim off the seam allowance just in case I need to make any more adjustment. So I'll go ahead and sew the side seam, turn it to the right side, and then we're going to move on to the next step. At this point, I've slipped in the bra cup before sewing the side seam. So I used a very soft bra cup which I took out from an old outfit. Okay, I did not stitch the bra cup, I just slip it in. Okay, next we're going to join the top onto the waistline of the pants. As I said, I'm using this for a jumpsuit. So when you fixing the top, you want to make sure that the dart on the waistline of the pants aligns with the dart on the top. Okay, so I'm going to take these and sew and come back to show you what it looks like. I'm probably going to be making this in another fabric. I'm thinking in my favorite color, yellow, because guys, come on, I'm loving what I'm seeing right now. Oof. I guess this time I'm going to make the pant longer. Anywho, this brings us to the end of this video. I hope you like this video. If you do, remember to leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to my channel. Bye. I'm still the one that you run to. Write your name.